The genetic anomaly. What is this 20-year-old doing that you're not to get so massive? In this video, I want to cover absolutely everything about this human being and talk about why and maybe even how he got to where he is and what in comparison you might be doing wrong. And I think honestly, some of the last things I have to say will surprise you. Before we do get started, I have a brand new ebook that I wanted to share with you guys. It's actually down in the description if you want it. It's free. I will be at some point charging for it, but I thought, hey, I might as well publish it with my most recent video for free to give me some perspective on what people think about it. So on the Transparent podcast done by Niall, there was a great episode recently published with the genetic anomaly. Just keep that in. Svein Falzon. He's a Ukrainian and recently he's gained a lot of traction within social media, doing collaborations with people like Larry Wheels and many other top Olympian coaches. He has an insane 3-year transformation that I think people kind of point fingers at and say that is not fucking possible, but you'd actually be surprised to find out that it is true. He also wears those weird masks and takes videos. I don't like that cringy shit. I don't know why people do it, but whatever, he's making money, so let's just talk about it. So Svein used to be a hardcore worker from the sounds of things, and in this podcast they talk about it.
I think 17 years old. I was working in a pet shop. Like my job was taking care of the orders and deliveries and carrying a lot of, let's say, a bag of cat food. So I was always lifting.
That's where the shoulders came from. Makes sense.
Then after that I was working in construction. So I went from bullshit pet shop to construction. So after spending a year there, I actually found a decent job working at a bank, like the contact center, the call center where I am right now. Yeah. So this is where I started focusing on bodybuilding, even though it's still hard to get my meals in and eat. At least I'm working in an office and not like extremely cold or extremely hot temperature. This is when I got my coach. Okay. So this is when I stopped being natural.
Oh, you started the hardcore bodybuilding. Yeah. Gotcha.
So as he said, he talked about getting a desk job at a call center, I believe, working pretty standard hours, but being able to sit for the majority of the day so that he could eat food. And at this point, it sounds like he actually could afford a coach. He was doing things semi-correctly, eating food, but not eating the right things, and training hard, but not really having a scheduled program from his own words. So coach was the next obvious step. And I think this is probably the first thing in the line of things that he did to get to the point that he's at now so fast. Hiring a coach before the age of 20 is absolutely insane. But this man made sure he could afford it and worked his ass off to do so. Now, to be honest, I'm sure the coach and him probably worked something out, because if you're a good coach, you can see that this kid's got some crazy genetic potential, and it'd be beneficial to have him on your team because the likelihood he's going to have some clients come into you is quite high. But not soon after hiring a coach and training for at least a couple years, naturally, he started his first cycle with that coach's advisement. And this is where things get a little bit interesting and almost counter to what most people would probably think he did.
What was your first cycle? Just test.
Yeah, just
Damn. Test. You blew up on an amp. Oh, fuck. That's crazy. I'm so curious how much now.
Yeah, just test. Gradually, we're just starting introducing new compounds because you don't take everything all at once. Just you need to see how your body responds. You know, I was doing it the safe way, the proper way. I never really fucked around with high dosages or anything. Like I always kept it low. I can't wait to like actually push it. I want to see how big I can get.
Yeah. So his first cycle consisted of apparently 1 ampule of test, which in Slavic countries is about 1 ampule, 250 milligrams. So assuming that he's telling the truth, that means his first cycle was 250 milligrams of testosterone a week. I don't know if this was ran with 1 injection, multiple injections, or how he did it, but for most people, I argue that they're likely doing this all in 1 injection, because when you pop an ampule open with those little glass vials, it's pretty much open into the environment, so you have to put it in something. Usually people choose to put it in their bodies to get rid of it. He did also mention that gradually over time he started to introduce more compounds. And he said, of course, he wanted to take things slow. We'll take him at his word here, but slowly he started to introduce more compounds. Now, usually when a bodybuilder is talking about introducing more compounds, this is discussing things like growth hormone, insulin, possibly variations of that testosterone molecule. So things like a DHT or dihydrotestosterone derivative like Masteron, Primobolan, Winstrol, or you have your nandrolone categorized drugs as well. So you have your NPP or nandrolone, you have trenbolone, you have methyl, you have ment, and then you have your testosterone variants like equipoise, d-bol, and a few others. So assuming he's following the general path of most bodybuilders, I would assume that he's probably starting with testosterone and then starting to add in maybe more DHT driven compounds, or possibly a testosterone derivative like equipoise or boldenone, which some of you might know it as. There's an interesting point where he just mentioned that understanding what's required at the pro level is really important, and he looks forward to having to use a lot because it's what's required at the pro level. So someone who's 20 years old looking forward to using a lot of androgenic compounds, quite interesting.
I can't wait to like actually push it. I want to see how big I can get.
Yeah.
Because I like for sure you need to like go to a certain level when you're at the pro stages. Like you have to push like at those levels. I want to see how freaky I can look with like when I'm there. I can't wait. It's something I really look forward to, honestly.
And I'm gonna tie this back together, keep this in mind. But then another thing that he said was he force-fed food for years, tons and tons of food to points where he would commonly vomit. And with this, many times he mentioned that he was crazy. He would eat literally his own puke off of a plate to get more food in.
Reminding me when I was natural, like this is just to see how kind of crazy I was, because you have to be a bit crazy to force feed yourself so much. I was eating so much, like I wanted to grow really bad. I never really wanted to hop on gear until I actually reached my genetic potential, and that was force feeding every day. I wasn't sleeping so I can get as many meals in as possible. And there was a time I ate like it was a lot of pasta. I used to eat a lot of pasta. I was already full from my last meal. I kept on eating, like my body did not want it. I was telling myself, like, if I can't finish this fucking bowl, I'm not enough. I didn't feel enough. If I didn't eat that bowl, I would have fucking went insane. Like, I cannot fail. Like, that was my mindset. When I actually managed to finish it, I got really nauseous. Like, my body just wanted to reject everything. I threw up all of it. I was eating the shit I threw up that was still on the plate.
No way.
This is... Like,
why?
This is insane.
This is fundamentally probably why part of the reason he got to where he is, especially so young, is the man's eating puke off of his own plate, as he said. But obviously, broken English, maybe he means that he just finished the food after he vomited. I can't really tell, but moral of the story is the guy's not necessarily normal. He's pushing through things that most people would complain about and usually ask for alternatives or switch or try to change, but way beforehand even getting to that point. His threshold for risk and tolerance to particular discomforts is extremely high, so therefore he was able to push through a lot of things that I think most people, 95% of bodybuilders here on this planet who claim that they're bodybuilders, wouldn't be able to do. Let's be realistic. Most people don't want to force feed themselves. Most people don't want to have to deal with gagging. Most people don't want to train legs and vomit whilst they're mid-set and then continue the set. But here's where things get really, really interesting. There's a video on Instagram that's really, really popular right now, and you guys have probably seen it. It's Larry Wheels versus a 20-year-old. And the interesting thing about this video is that Larry Wheels almost looks smaller than this kid. But how could that be? I mean, he's been training and competing even for years compared to this individual's time under the bar. Well, I say there's a lot to actually conclude just from this alone. Granted, there's genetic variability in this sport and all physical endeavors, but there's still some key notes we need to look at here and take away from. Larry Wheels isn't just this clean guy either. We know a lot about his history of steroid abuse, growth hormone, and other peptides. In fact, he's actually been very open about what he does and not really trying to conceal it in any manner. And he went on a podcast once and talked about his quote-unquote mega cycle, the biggest cycle that he's ever ran, and Greg Doucette did a great job of actually covering this, and I'm going to take a couple of his words here. Larry Wheels took 2 grams of testosterone, and I would argue probably some other things outside of testosterone, growth hormone, insulin, maybe some oral 17-alkylated compounds, who knows. those. But as Greg Doucette perfectly says in the video, people are going to have different needs. Genetics drives a lot of what people will need to get to a particular level. Some people can run off very low doses of performance enhancing drugs. Other people need a lot of performance enhancing drugs to get even close to an achievement that someone could probably get to naturally. But what I want to focus on is just generically a clean slate, what's on paper. Larry Wheels is an individual that has taken upwards of 2 grams of androgenic anabolic steroids. And to give those of you who aren't aware of this field some perspective, an average dose for a male using testosterone replacement therapy, which is the same molecule we're talking about here, is going to be about 150 to 100 milligrams a week of testosterone. Compare that to 2 grams or 2,000 milligrams, you can see that the dosages are a lot higher than what would be normally prescribed. And the average competitor probably doesn't go much beyond 1 gram of testosterone and other derivatives combined, let alone just 2 grams of testosterone. So 2 grams is an extremely high dose. In understanding that Larry took this to get to his genetic potential and reach the pretty much limits that he did, I would have to ask the question, what is our genetic anomaly taking to get bigger, faster, at a younger age than Larry Wheels? Arguably, Larry Wheels, someone who is very genetically gifted in the sport of strength and muscle. So what do I think happened? More than likely, well, that's actually kind of complex and I'm happy to get into it. But first, if you guys could like this video, it would help me out tremendously, satisfy the YouTube gods who look so down upon fitness influencing type YouTube channels. So please hit the like button, maybe even comment down below and let me know what you think. Otherwise, let's talk about what the genetic anomaly is taking. So he said he took 1 amp of testosterone a week and slowly started to add more compounds. And I sure do believe him. I think 1 amp of testosterone, or again 250 milligrams, is probably around the ballpark of where he started. But I would also argue that it didn't take very long, or at least I highly doubt that he stayed there for a long time, and likely he increased his doses pretty rapidly to create the gains that he did so substantially. He has said many times, and this is what I believe to be the main statement of insecurity in someone who doesn't want to talk about the doses that they've used because they are too high, I only take as much as I need, never more, bro.
I never really fucked around with high dosages or anything. Like, I always kept it low.
And it's like, I always hear that from the dudes who take the most. There's a great study done about testosterone in healthy males with dose varieties and seeing the effect that those doses had on subsequent muscle and strength gains. This study was done even without people training with resistance weights, just using simple androgens and a similar caloric intake between all the subjects to see what happened. And the doses varied a lot. It started at 50 milligrams and it went all the way up in certain intervals up to 600 milligrams a week. And as you can imagine, 300 milligrams of testosterone a week worked much better than 150 milligrams a week at gaining strength and size in individuals within this study. 600 milligrams worked tremendously better than 300 milligrams and certainly worked better than 150 milligrams, 100 milligrams, or even 50 milligrams. And if you kept going, I guarantee that this effect would elongate and you'd see similar results every time there was a dose titration. Everybody who had a little bit of a higher dose in testosterone value would get a subsequent greater result up until a certain point where it would surely be a reverse U-curve and you'd start to see a decline in progress due to systemic stress or unhealthy environments or what have you. And please don't get me wrong here, this doesn't mean you should immediately use grams of gear, especially if you're starting out. I don't want anyone here shooting 7 cc's for their first cycle a week. But what it does show is that higher doses do typically work better in some extent. Again, I imagine that it's a reverse U-curve and it's not necessarily this linear thing where just the more you can shove in your body, the more results you'll get. But there is an effect of greater equaling greater results. So as a conclusion, what I think is that probably, yeah, he started out at 1 ampule of testosterone a week or 250 milligrams of testosterone a week. But as he said, he started to add a little bit more and play around, and we haven't even gotten to growth hormone yet. But he probably started at 250 milligrams of testosterone, went up to 500 milligrams. Well, you're already doing 1 ampule, why not do 2? Then worked his way up to 3 a week, so 3 ampules, 750 milligrams of testosterone a week. 4 ampules, 1,000 1,000 milligrams of testosterone a week, this is really where some special stuff starts to happen in most individuals. And then likely what happened was at 1,000 milligrams a week, he likely applied some other androgenic compounds like DHT derivatives, masteron, primobolan, etc., and maybe GH and possibly even insulin. And what was really a big red flag here, and you might be thinking that these doses are ridiculous, and I assure you they're pretty commonplace within the bodybuilding industry, and what was really a red flag here is that he said he doesn't have money. He's literally living off zero money and can only pay for his gear, and the reason that he is broke is because of the expense of his gear. He said the shit is so expensive. I don't know about you, but personally, my gear budget a week is a lot cheaper than my grocery bill per week. So if someone is spending so much that they are becoming deprived of income sources and money from it, I would imagine that they're taking an exorbitant amount of something, whether that is testosterone and its other derivatives, growth hormone, or insulin. So what should you, the individual watching this man walk amongst humans, this 20-year-old who is bigger than almost every single fitness influencer who is 10 years older than him, what should you do? Well, I think the answer is pretty simple, and I've kind of been saying it this whole time, but I'll break it down for you. So what I'm saying here is, yes, there is a dose titration effect that when you increase the dose linearly, you seem to get better results. But this doesn't mean you should just increase the doses into the sky. It means you should increase the doses to points at which you find you get the best results and maintain those doses until you find that those results are not being acquired at the same rate as they once were. And possibly at that point, then you might need a gradual increase of more androgen or anabolic compounds. Usually what I find is that 100 milligram titrations every single time that you're finding a stall or a lull in progress is all that's needed to make a significant amount more progress in continuing down that path. But gear and PEDs and testosterone, these aren't the only things that we're discussing here. This individual also force-fed himself for many years. He discusses on many occasions how often he puked and how much he's still uncomfortable because of how much he has to consume on a daily basis to sustain his rates of growth or even just maintain the muscle mass that he does have. And arguably, I think most individuals who are training in some capacity or for trying to have a physique and be popular on Instagram and whatever that might mean for you aren't willing to force feed. Not saying that everyone needs to, because obviously I think if everyone did, they would just get really fat and it would be unproductive for most people. But I certainly don't think people are eating enough of the right things for the body weight or body that they have in mind. I'd say 9 times out of 10 when I onboard a new client or help someone out with their diet and nutrition, it's the fact of the matter that they're under eating. They're eating too little protein. They're eating barely enough carbohydrates. Their chrononutrition is not correct. Their simple micronutrient distribution is not correct, and they're malnourished and nourished at the same time. It's an awful situation. So they're experiencing lackluster results, they're eating too little, and they're not eating enough of the right things, so ultimately they're just stuck in a rut. So in that case, you need to optimize your nutrition, your chrononutrition, meaning the timing of where you eat your foods to optimize function for each meal, and also the total values of each of your meals. What is the micronutrients? How many of the 150 essential nutrients do you get on a daily basis from the foods that you consume? These questions are critical, and if you don't know the answers to them, you're in a really tight spot. But I think another thing that we can take away from the genetic anomaly is that he hired a coach very, very, very early on. Usually most individuals, especially this young, have a big ego about them, and they think that everything that they know is plenty to get them the results that they want and achieve a goal of a lifetime and not have any help doing it. But the reality is he was able to succumb to the pressure of realizing that he needed help and that this was not the correct way of doing things. And once he got that coach, his progress shot through the roof. And the best part is he waited until he had professional advice before going down the path of performance enhancing drugs. He also started working a office job compared to laborious jobs. And as someone who is interested in building muscle, it would behoove you to do the same. Working on your feet all day, walking around and doing hard labor isn't conducive to great success with within bodybuilding, especially if you're trying to build lots and lots of tissue. That extra fatigue and caloric expenditure that is being created through movement and just exertion every single day will lead to suboptimal results, and in long-term situations you will not see the progress that other individuals see who unfortunately sit down all day. As much as bodybuilders like to call themselves athletes, it's not a very athletic sport. In fact, the majority of it is consistent of sitting around and eating massive amounts of food. But at the end of the day, if you still did all these things, hired a coach at a very young age, ate all the right things day after day, year after year, and took the needed amount of androgens or other performance enhancing drugs to get the results that you wanted, would you still look like our genetic anomaly? And the answer is probably sadly not. You could take as much androgens and growth hormone and insulin as well as eat as much food as you want, and you'd probably still never look like this as fast as this individual did. The reality is that we are driven by genetics every single day. Our components and structure and makeup of our body is driven by factors that we simply have zero control over. We might be able to influence them slightly, but it's only slightly. Most of what we will become is already dictated by our genes, and hacking that system is a great idea, but in the long term it's not going to effectively get you the results of another individual's body like this guy. 20 years old, being a surplus of 240 pounds and only achieving that within 3 years after being 50 kilograms or just about 110 pounds is insane. And I would argue that most individuals will never be able to accomplish this in their entire lifetime, not even some spectacles like Mr. Olympians. So this isn't a call to just start blowing your butt up with androgens and oil by shooting testosterone up there. But what it is saying is that there is possibility you could get results similar to this, but you'll never match the results that this individual got unless your genetic transcriptions are exactly identical to his, and we took you both to the lab and did like genetic sequencing, and you said similar series of genomes, which is just literally statistically impossible. If you can just find a goal that's going to align with the person that you want to look like, or which is the best version of you, I don't think you'd have unrealistic expectations to look like this individual. But I'll also add this to the fact that I don't think many people would want to look like this individual, to be fair enough, unless your goal is to be a professional bodybuilder at the highest of the highest levels, which clearly this is his goal, and that's going to require some extremes like performance enhancing drugs, like force feeding food, and like training an astronomical amount. And most of you might not want to do that, and that's okay, because honestly it's not a healthy lifestyle, but nor is any obsession. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and it gave you some insight as to what might be the best path to look like the genetic anomaly. If you did, I'd recommend commenting down below and let me know what you think about what he's doing and maybe taking, and I will see you in the next video. Deuces.